Hello and welcome to Soul Portals, exploring psychospiritual horizons with your hosts Cedric Spire and Deanna Nagel. Cedric is an author and therapist who developed the interview guidance model and is a pathfinder in the psychospiritual realm. Deanna created the Essential Soul Care model, a model suitable for therapists, coaches, and healers. The monthly episodes of Soul Portals feature guests sharing insights from their personal paths and professional practices. Thank you for tuning in for the Soul Talk with all kinds of trailblazing teachers and guides as Cedric, Deanna, and guests explore new evolutionary landscapes.
I'd like to open with a brief invocation, which is, may the spirit flow freely through this gathering and this conversation, allowing it to be both energizing and edifying. And then comes the opening quote. But our guest today is Casey Muze, and who's a public speaker and a mentor and does drumming therapy. And you'll find out a lot more about him as we go along. This quote is from the chapter he has in a book, Holistic Mental Health. Mm-hmm. It's a many different chapters on all kinds of approaches. So Casey says, and this very much relates to our intriguing theme, the beauty of drumming lies in its ability to create this cognitive neuro effect, stimulating both the left and right sides of the brain. The left side of the brain, responsible for logic and language, collaborates with the right side, which is associated with creativity and intuition. These two sides of the brain are designed to work together harmoniously. So for all you therapists out there, it's very similar to EMDR, the effect of the practice that Casey does. Another way of getting to the same integration that EMDR does. So back to you, Deanna.
Hi, Casey.
Hey, Deanna, how are you?
I'm good. And just as a caveat, I know Casey because we both contributed to the book that we just referenced. So that's how I met Casey and was intrigued with his work. So Casey, in a word, I mean, I know everybody can see your bio. I'm going to put your website link in the chat. And Cedric gave his interpretation of what you do. Can you give us in a sentence or two what you do? And then can you lean into the spiritual piece behind how you came to do what you do?
Mm-hmm.
So I would describe shortly what I do as creating spaces for healing by providing percussion interventions and accompaniment of cognitive functioning. No matter what age range you are, no matter what facet of life you come from, I also serve a lot of neurodivergent clients as well as ECE or early childhood education for cognitive progression in that manner, as well as dementia and Alzheimer's clients. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really wide range, and yeah, children too, right? Children and
yeah, it's super wide. So I'm truly blessed. And I'll go back to the spiritual portion, and I hadn't forgotten to discuss and talk about that. I'm truly blessed to be in East Texas, where music therapy is a nuance that is not so understood or welcome sometimes. And it's so great. It's directly aligned with my spiritual journey. So that's why I'm leaning into this portion of it. And then I'm going to bounce back to how it does it directly for me. But it's so great. I also do drumline instruction for a arts magnet school here in Tyler, Texas. So a lot of drumming is what I do for a living, which is fantastic. I would have not thought that that would be my journey. And a spiritual portion of it is what I would say is cadence and time and heartbeat and rhythm and connected with God or Father. I mean, I'm Christian, so for me, it's God, and that also just leans into my background of being a substance abuse counselor. So making space for non-judgmental statements and comments for all people that believe in all facets of spirituality, right? It's a huge habit of mine that I don't know that will ever go away. But cadence and rhythm and time and understanding how to slow any moment that exists down and spending just the most intentional thought processes in every moment that exists has always been really beneficial for my therapeutic approach and really beneficial for my spiritual journey, and it aligns with it. And just playing drums has directly attached to that for me whenever the intention of slowing the time down or speeding it up, but then also having as much influence over my control of hands with touching a hand drum or wrapping my hands around drumsticks is just really close and connected with me. So yeah,
Sounds very meditative.
no doubt, no doubt.
Yeah.
All of it is. I believe drumming. I believe anything you do for a living should be meditative in as deep capacity as possible. For me, drumming is nothing but meditative, and I'm blessed to be able to be in a position to provide therapeutic interventions and um, do things like be a drumline instructor is just outstanding for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, because I bet I know the answer to this, but do you ever, when you're working with children or, whatever, elderly, in certain settings,
Mm-hmm.
maybe more so in some than others, but do you see those moments in the clients, in the audience where you see that spiritual piece in them come alive?
Yeah. Yeah. All the time. Um, and actually, I mean, huge example I can think about is the first opening paragraph in my chapter where I reference this kid who is
Mhm.
so enthused by the drumming exercise. And I think we were just guiding them through a simple paradiddle, which is the pattern of right, left, right, right, left, left. And some of the accents added to it, which I mean, I can kind of go through some of that today. But he was just his spirit when the practice was done, just yelled out, man, that shit felt good. And for me, that was just amazing and humbling. And the fact that his teachers created that space to where they heard it, because I didn't hear him say that. His teachers heard him say it. They said, yeah, did you hear so and so say that? And going through this is a quite a aha moment that happened yesterday as I was doing drumline instruction with in the magnet school. I was going through some of the bilateral practices of sensory adaptation to where you have vision boards of color notated. So I had a measure, so it was 4/4 notes, and um I had it I had them separated by color and then number and then hands. So you only have two hands, right? Then I forgot the actual vision board, and I had this really cool African colored sweater conveniently. And so I was mapping out the colors, and they were like, oh, kind of like your sweater. So I used my sweater. And so that was really cool. So they used
Wow.
my sweater to mark with the colors, and it was great. And so I had them, they were able to understand which one was right, which one was left, what the colors were, what the hands were, what the numbers were by the end of it. And they were adding accents to it. And they were like, oh, what if we add this accent? And so watching them play and explore cognitively and then act that out was such a blessing and such a fantastic thing, right?
Mm.
Just several examples of that as well. Even when I go in and do home sessions for my trap learning program that I provide, I say my, it's not my, but I'm one of the providers of trap learning that are international.
Can you say
And I,
what that stands for? The
Yeah.
it's
TRAP?
Sure, it's the Rhythm Arts Project, and it's actually trap learning. So if you would tag the trap learning website in this post when you put it up as well, because my good friend, Mr. Eddie Tondori, is the director and overseer of that, and had a conversation with him during COVID of all times, whenever I was trying to figure out what life looked like. And a mutual friend of ours reached out to me and said, "Hey, you should contact my friend Eddie in California. He's got this thing called trap learning. And I think you guys kind of speak on the same accord." And so I talked to Eddie, like a 3 hour long conversation. It was fantastic. And by the end of that conversation, he was like, "I would like to have another conversation to see if you being a trap provider would be appropriate, where you would have to normally go through the whole process of going through a training." And then he talked to me the next time for about 2 hours, and he said, "I just emailed the training to you. You got it. Do with it what you will." I
Mm.
have no doubt you would pay all respect to it. But yeah, it's the Rhythm Arts Project, and it's learning at the end of that, which that is the program that is specifically neurodivergent, but then
Mm.
again, not limited to. And so, yeah, I do that in group sessions, and then I also do that in home sessions
Mm.
with the family for education and integration to where it continues after I leave. So I do it with for basis of a 6 month period. I do 2 sessions a month in that 4 week time period. And so I go through some of the vision boards and some of the call and response audio practices, whether it be paradiddles, whether it be triplets, whether it be whichever, right? I go through reverse engineering of building patterns, taking patterns away, understanding the process of patterns. There's a lot of problem solving for central nervous system and executive functioning, frontal lobe unlocking, and I do some diaphragmatic breathing in with that as well. There's a whole lot of components to it, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So the purpose of that, with the home sessions, is providing it in the home so that the parent understands what it could look like and what it should look like. So that way I don't have to be there, and it's a gift to them.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds very technical, but I'm sure when it comes across to the clients, it does in a simple way because it's so experiential, right? For them.
Yeah, it is no doubt. And also, just like, even with all the technical aspects of it and options for dynamic that are appropriate per client, it's also really important for me to just be in the moment and flexible and be with that client as much as possible, but
Yeah.
then also be with the family and just deeply connected, right?
And you must do it prayerfully from what you said about your own faith and
Yeah.
and prepping for
Yeah,
this. Why
it's
you
kind
laugh?
of like the Hippocratic oath: do no harm. Yeah.
Somebody asked in the chat, is it just in the USA? I did put the link in.
No, no, I can provide trap over online correspondence and give education with all the appropriateness as possible. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure all my contact links will be put
Mhm.
down below, but I welcome all the conversation about that.
So do you actually do Zoom sessions where,
I
for the
do.
same effect?
I don't do so much of the Zoom sessions where there's call and response to where I play and they play. It's more of showing the patterns and the exercises, and then they play afterwards for a period of time, because there's so much latency with Zoom, but they're
Mm.
still very so effective.
Mhm. Now your title, your kind of an intriguing title.
I
Um,
do, huh? Yeah.
it's like right away the title is invokes like the before story, in the before and after, because it's
Yeah.
the anxious rhythm of the muted black boy. Very
Yeah.
provocative title to your
Yeah.
chapter.
Yeah.
So was that you, the muted black boy? Is that
It's still me. It will forever be me. It's
uh,
fine. I think as long as I live, that title will be me in person. I think even after I pass, that title will still associate it with being something that I uphold. And I think I actually proudly uphold that title
mm,
due to me being someone who audaciously stands up for what I believe in, and which are very cognitive and neural things, and also not being ashamed or afraid to explore those things and not being ashamed to discuss those things in person. It's
yeah.
been a very in your face or in public face presence for me, especially living in East Texas and going through all of the social challenges of allowing people to understand or creating spaces for conversation of understanding,
Mm,
right? And
yeah.
sometimes that is the question that I ask myself whenever I build the conversation is what setting do I create this conversation in? What word do I say to create the hook to bring people into this conversation, right? Maybe even what story do I dig in my background to introduce this conversation, right? All those things are really important as I discuss what I do.
You know who would appreciate you? It's just coming to me. You know Van Jones on CNN? Like I can see.
Mm, I don't think so. I should, huh?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's cool.
yeah,
He's good.
yeah. He would be like really nodding as as he heard you speak there.
Yeah.
Because for that quality of conversation, not because those discourses and get so much into like black and white points of view, like, literally
Uh,
and figuratively.
yeah.
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 Well, and when I read the chapter, you know, to meet you, so as background, you and I were in a couple of meetings about the book and
Mm-hmm.
did a couple of podcast events on behalf of the book. And I had not read your chapter yet. I
Yeah.
don't think we had the book in hand yet. But anyway, I would never identify you as muted,
Mm,
Right.
right? Um,
Right.
that's good.
you,
Yeah.
you, right? And it was very subtle for me in the chapter that the drum, you finding the rhythm
Mm-hmm.
literally helped unmute you.
Yeah.
And so somebody has said in the chat, does the drum speak for you?
No.
No, no,
Right.
because you found your voice.
No. Well, I think what happened is I think I'm going to reference a transition that was like really dynamic when I started the endeavors of providing education and therapy of healing with drumming. Was when I moved to there's a timeline story. I'm actually really excited to say this. Uh, so when I moved to a magical place called Nacogdoches, Texas, which is spelled N O N-O-C-A Nacogches, Nacog, no, Doches, Nacogdoches, right? Which is like an hour and a half away from where I live now. But like I lived there for 6 years and I started all of these endeavors there. And when I stamped my footprint there, I made this intentional transition to move from drumming on drum set mostly to hand drums because they're more tactile. Now, listen, I didn't make the tactile connection at that point in time whatsoever. I just did it because I'm Black and I'm African American and it's close to my roots and it just felt good, right? And also made the symbiotic connection or transition from music to serve myself only for like in studio purposes, because I used to be an in studio producer in Dallas, Texas, and I was signed to an independent music label for a little bit due to some unforeseen things, which will take some time. We won't get into them, but if you want to ask me later on in another conversation, or if anybody would like to ask me later on off chat, we can have that conversation as well. But I made another transition from serving myself to serving others with music. And so that was really dynamic for me.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
so, yeah. You found a way for your vocation to be more of service to the collective than just to yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Just yesterday, I heard a rabbi say, "Do you want to be needy or be needed?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one end of the spectrum, like mute to an acclaimed public speaker is one end of the spectrum to the other. The
It's it's a whole full body thing. It's wild when I think about it. But yeah, muted in a lot of spaces. And I also think I figured out a couple of things. One of those things being how to use my voice to speak to the right audience at the right time, which is all audiences, but in specific times that they are willing to listen, and how to identify that time. And also to recognize how to not be so concerned with people's opinions.
Mm.
Well, and I also got the sense that while you were engaged in music, which was and having a music background myself, like music feeds me.
Yeah.
Um, but it sounds like even though you were doing music, it wasn't doing you. You weren't, it
No.
was not congruent. It wasn't, and at least for me, sometimes in my past with my music, my ego got in the way and I couldn't
Yes.
appreciate the music for music's sake.
Yes. It had gotten to that point for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so somebody's asking, what made the change from self to others, Casey? Did you see the impact somewhere?
Yeah, that was the spiritual connection of continuing to not listen to God in conversation, and him telling me I need to make a change, and I was just ignoring him. And then finally getting sick and tired of the consequences of not listening and not being obedient. It was the culmination of a bunch of conversations not heard. It just,
Mm.
yeah. And
You,
then finally I had to, from Dallas, I had to move back home to Longview, Texas. And so listen, for a 24-year-old to have to move from a city to back to a rural area, that's like the most devastating thing in the world.
are you affiliated with any denomination or community?
Yeah,
In
no, I mean, I grew up in the I don't really even know. I grew up in a black church. And
Is that
then
like Baptist? Is it?
yeah, I grew up in a Black Baptist church, and then there was another denomination that transitioned from that in the Black church as well. It wasn't. It was more. It is definitely a space from Pentecostal.
Mm.
Um, and when I moved to Dallas, I started going to non-denominational churches just because the volume of music was too loud. Like I would come home and my mom would be like, "Why'd you switch to non-denominational white churches?" And I would say, "Because the music's too loud at black churches." And it was absolutely accurate. And now I hope my mom doesn't hear me say this, but maybe she does need to hear me say this. But now she goes to a church in Humble, Texas, that the EQing and all of the mixes of the music are so completely off to my ear palette. And it's so here's what's so funny. It's so drum heavy that it's annoying.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I had a sidebar question. Uh, what do you think of rap music? Because rap music is like emblematic for unmuting and saying,
Sure, I
"Here's
love
your
rap music.
voice,"
I'm
you
a
know,
hip hop
like,
head, man. I love rap music. That's my bread and butter.
okay.
Rap music and like 80s, late 70s, 80s, and early 90s R&B music.
Mhm.
Okay.
But then I also like things like Sigur Rós, which is like Icelandic post-rock music, and Bjork, and I like
Mm,
jazz like Elephants Gerald, and um yeah, I like a
mm,
broad range of things. I like some metal music as well. Deftones are cool. Yeah.
mm. And did you have a role model or mentor on your path? Like,
Listen, I have had um several.
mm,
So my name Muse is not my name. It's not anything legal whatsoever. It is actually a given nickname by six mentors that I've had, and still have five of them. One of them has passed. But they did not know of each other at all. And at the same around the same time started calling me like Muse and La Muse or the Muse or the Mused one, and some different variations of that name, but all spelled with a Z. And this was when I was living in Dallas. And so when I had to move back to Longview and then move back to Nacogdoches, I woke up one day and did some research over Muse and made all the connections and called one of them. And I said, bro, how did you say, man, I'm just waiting on you to connect the dots. It wouldn't make no difference if we told you. And so called all of them, and they all started meeting collectively and just kind of discussing my life and what seeds they wanted to impart and give to me. So
mm,
no, I'm real big on mentorship. That's actually how I became a mentor, is just being real big on mentorship.
mm,
So
yeah.
you went from being muted to being a muse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I may have been amused even when I was muted. Yeah.
You know, one of our stock questions you answer every which way, like already, which is what uplifts your spirit and allows you to lose track of time.
Oh,
That's what it's kind of what you're all about. And
yeah.
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 Mm,
Can you talk a little bit about, because I think we've got a few therapists in the room.
Sure.
Um, in this chapter you wrote your story, but
Hmm.
then you gave an example of a practice that people could use.
Yes.
And and there's also that word you've already said and I can't remember it.
Paradiddle.
Yes. Can you
Yeah.
can you explain some of that and more on the binaural beats, and then
yeah.
talk about this little exercise?
Yeah. Where do you want me to start? I think you asked me like three different things.
I did. Um, what's that word again? Paradiddle.
Paradiddle. Paradiddle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us
Yeah.
about the paradiddle and then tell us about the exercise.
Paradiddle is a drum rudiment that is very sacred to every drummer. It almost becomes kind of a sacred word that if anybody says the word paradiddle, they know that you have had a conversation with the drummer or you are a drummer. And so paradiddle, the hand pattern is a four pattern hand pattern. It's right, left, right, right. Then you have the mirroring side of it, which will be left, right, left, left, right. So like looking at my hands, right? So which this would be my right hand. my left hand, right? So then I would play right, left, right, right, and then the mirror left, right, left, left, right. And so sometimes, if this makes sense, if it's part of the goals that are cognitively appropriate for any client, I like to guide through this exercise with accents. Accents are things that are louder than the other things, right? So I may play one is louder than the other two, three, and four. So one would be right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right. So when you do the whole thing, you're going to go right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right. And then I move seamlessly through. So then the long goal is to get them to understand the moving pattern. So then you move to the 2, then you move to the 3, then you move to the 4, right? So then we may break it down piece by piece, and it may take some time, and that's fine. It's fantastic. It's part of the journey, right? So the added part of that is providing the vision board. So then the notated ones that look like right, left, and then right, right, left, right, left, left. So I have a measure that is notated with 4 notes that mark the hands, right? So now you have optical sensory, right? And then if you're touching anything, then that's your tactile pleasure in your senses, right? Right. So then if you call in response the whole entire thing, then that is your audio, but then it's also your verbal. And if you're hearing me affirm it, then also call in response back to you. That's also additive to your audio, right? So then deeply immersed in every single sensory that is available is the key to learning and the cognitive functioning of the bilateral left and right connecting together, right? So then you're also practicing executive functioning and problem solving, because in truth, it's not an easy practice to learn, and it's not an easy goal to get and understand, right? Like even when I started doing right, left, right, right, you guys are like, oh boy. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can hardly know my right from my left, much less.
Yeah. Listen.
It,
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it,
yeah. But listen, when I tell you that I can get 4-year-olds to understand this,
Mm.
it's phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal. And to think that because they understand this, they're understanding problem solving at such a young age. And it's kind of like that book, Oh, the Places We Will Go, right? Which is funny. I referenced that. My mom used to read that a lot to me when I was younger. So now it's just kind of stuck in my psyche sometimes. However, seeing all the aha moments of problem solving and then boosting neuroplasticity at an early age is incredible, right? Yeah.
can the client do it the way you were just doing it without actually having a drum or anything that they're
Yeah.
touching? Yeah.
No drum is needed.
Yeah.
Now, a drum is the most beneficial because you're feeling the sound waves and all the frequencies that come off of it. And you
Yeah.
can also play with parts of a drum or pieces on a drum, whether you are in the middle of the drum or the rim of the drum or the cusp of a drum, which is simply a way that you mold and bend your hands to create a slap tone or an open tone that's different. So then you can also play with how you hold your hands. It's very different and very dynamic, right? You can also play with muted tones or unmuted tones, which are open tones or closed tones, right? It gets so very intricate
Yeah.
and so very advanced. And then you can also deal with basic practices like triplet practices that are simplistic, or 2-note practices that are very simplistic as well. You can also play with a same color call outs: red, 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 blue, 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 blue. Yeah. Yeah, man.
Is
I'm
this
telling
Okay,
something
so
you were taught or
you.
discovered or both?
Yes and yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sally had a really interesting comment, Deanna.
Yeah, Sally says, I've been doing that rhythm most of my life. I had no idea it was a thing or had that name. I've only heard paradiddle in the context of Scottish pipe band
Your
drummers.
your vocal was cracking a bit there.
Am I cracking?
Uh,
Yeah,
what's her name?
Sally.
Sally, are you in Scotland?
Yeah.
Mhm.
She
Sally, I'm
says she's only ever heard paradiddle in the context of Scottish pipe band drummers.
yeah. Sally, I'm glad I can give you a little bit of enlightenment. But yeah. Sally, let's have a whole conversation about paradiddles after this. We can do that. Because
Yeah.
So
then
you
there's also
basically you gave
because
the examples of in the book you give the practice, and so you did that because you said there are many different ways you can practice this
yeah,
without a drum.
there's so many. And now
Yeah.
listen, Sally, there's also double paradiddles and triple paradiddles and flamdiddles and triplet diddles and all kinds of diddles.
It sounds kinky.
I need to make a I need to make a book that like, oh, how the diddle, something like a children's book about
Yeah.
diddles. That'd be
Yeah.
great.
Do you have any miracle cures in your history or repertoire that you're not shy to call that miracle cure?
Miracle cure. Cure like for what?
Like like um Asperger's, autism, like somebody who
Mm,
other practitioners wouldn't have succeeded with, and when they came to you was a breakthrough.
sure. Uh I do, but it has more along the lines of the environment of which individuals live in and not so much my therapeutic approach,
Mhm.
which is be conscious of radiation that exists in the room that you dwell
Mhm. Hmm. That's a mysterious answer.
in. Too much radiation, wrong kind of radiation activates and is
Mhm.
triggers for autism and Asperger's and all of
Mhm.
those things.
But
Mm.
you were there, and I assume your presence brought that to light.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, and
That
the other miracle is your story in the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. By miracle, it's a grand term, but something would surprise
yeah.
you and you'd say, thank God afterwards and be
Yeah.
grateful.
Yeah. It's a good story. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was a fun story to live now. Yeah.
Okay, we're down to the last 15 minutes. I wanted to ask about the bigger picture of, what they call race relations in the States,
Sure.
all the violence, you know, the
The collective
uh,
conscious.
and
Hmm.
why the so-called progress is so sporadic. Like, you'll have the conversation dialogue, then will be another shootout, right,
Hmm.
with the cops. And do you have anything to say in the larger scale, how your whole perspective might be redemptive? Like, how do you see it evolving or improving especially in the States?
Um, cyclical.
Hmm.
I mean, it's gonna continue to some degree, and that pattern is going to continue. And I mean, the reality of it is, new circumstances come to light, or new circumstances happen, and responses of people are similar because of concerns and distractions, and so they get distracted or they'll advertise things and put things on social media or publications or the news or blah blah blah, which advocates or irritates somebody else's psyche. And then you
Yeah.
have people that are consciously not putting things out on any publication that could be messy or irritating to the souls or to the spirit. Those two sides of the coin happen and will continue to happen. And unfortunately, I don't see it getting better, because in situations to where we shed light to things, that's that one situation, and those few people that see it. Now, maybe when you talk about communicative things in specific areas, that's a different conversation, and that may get better. As a whole, I don't really know.
I mean, I could see you, for example, if you had the opportunity to work with the police, if to go in and do a workshop for them, so that their
Hmm.
minds become a little more holistic, and it's not like the trigger happy reaction with somebody who's mentally ill, and the story that happens over and over.
That would be cool.
That would be
We would
cool.
have to I would have to find a police station that would be willing to let me do that. Tyler,
Yeah,
Texas is a little rigid.
right,
I would imagine so, yeah.
Yeah.
right.
But I can think of um, many settings where just essentially balancing the right and left brain
Yeah. Yeah.
would be beneficial.
Yeah. No, in all settings. And yeah, and
Yeah.
specifically, um, the the people that are overseeing the health and well-being of others, cognitively, physically, emotionally, spiritually, for that growth, because those are the people that shepherd over us. So yeah, no
Yeah,
doubt.
because you do a lot of public speaking at different places, right?
I do. I
Yeah.
do. I do. Yeah, I have a lot of fun doing that. Yeah.
Mm.
There's a question. Can information be transmitted without words via the drum?
Yes. Oh, yes. Most definitely. Information, energy, yeah, just spirits of intent of people. Yes.
Mm. In the biggest picture, I mean, going bigger in the bigger picture, there's this heavy duty book. You know,
Hmm.
I read a lot of books like this, and the other authors are always referring to this book.
Yeah.
You know, it's very heavy duty, thick. You know,
Yeah.
but um, I haven't read it yet. I've just read books where they reference this. But I think the basic idea is that if you go back far enough, the hemispheres were naturally united,
Hmm.
and consciousness as we know it is when there started to be a split and a breakdown. Hence the title,
Yes.
breakdown of the
Can you,
bicameral mind.
yeah, read
Yes.
the title again, because
The origin of consciousness in the breakdown of the bicameral mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the really big picture of evolution and what consciousness has been through, and why there's such an important need to reunite the two
Hmm.
sides. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I
Christine, could you please type down the name again? Which name?
think she means the book, right?
The name
The,
of the book.
the
Yeah, can you?
book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the origin
Okay.
consciousness of Julian Jaynes, Jaynes.
Can you type that in? Because I can't see it.
No, well, I don't have the chat open. Uh,
Anyway,
yeah,
so yeah, while Cedric's doing that, um,
Yeah.
the question about, can information be transmitted without words via the drum, or I guess any instrument for that matter? To me, that elicits the sixth sense, or the clair senses, the other language, the third ear. Um,
hmm
and I'm sure you see that with the people you work with,
Yeah. Yeah. And
that
see
you
it
see some of that opening up.
often, often. Yeah. Yeah. I think to some degree, I have seen that with every client that I've worked with, and a lot of every unintentional person that I've influenced, that I've known about, whether it be like, I remember when I first moved to Tyler, I brought this steel drum to the mall and just walked around and started playing and acquired the nickname Magic Man from a kid that I met on that day and have did not know at all. And she posted the video on Instagram, and I walked into our local barbecue spot here in Tyler, and her mom's, "Hey, Magic Man," and had a full conversation with me and let me know that her daughter now worked at that barbecue restaurant. And so I met her 3 whole years later. It was great.
Mm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So somebody's asking, are you going to drum for us? And we did test that, and unfortunately the drumming doesn't come through via the Zoom um,
Yeah.
without magical backup technical help. So
Yeah.
it was a thought though. And then there's another question. Can you say more about drumming and people with dementia?
Sure. Call and response and memory syncing is a lot of what I do. So picking out songs from decades or time frames and playing the rhythmical patterns that exist and doing the harmonic melodies with my voice, or just hums or up and down, and then getting them to repeat the hums up and down. And uh yeah, so a lot of that is a practice that I use, as well as not left and right, because that's a hard function for processing sometimes with ECE and with dementia clients. So we work up to it with ECE. Sometimes with dementia clients, I may end up doing it if it is a connection where I go back periodically, like if I return monthly or I return bi-monthly or whichever it may be, we can work up to it if they've heard me use that language repetitively or before, then that's something that we can do. There's a lot of 3 count rhythms that take place for heartbeat. There's always something about the number 3 that connects more along the lines with heartbeat and natural rhythm, not fours, not twos, not fives, but the number 3 in um, moving accents through threes is really so very cool to watch.
Mm. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self,
Oh man.
assuming in your lost and found,
Ah,
or
20-year-old self.
or
Hmm.
any age before you had your breakthrough?
Hmm. I would say, Casey, you may want to do something a little bit. I don't really know. Maybe don't hang out with this particular person right now. It would be like, there's a particular name that's in my head, which I'm not gonna do name shout outs, but it would be, don't hang out with this particular person right now, because they're not doing things that are gonna be good for your future.
Hmm.
Probably be that,
Right.
because there's a name that's just like in the front of my mind.
Uh-huh.
So that was an environmental influence,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
sort of like the radiation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and somebody says, are we Are we like drums vibrating to a special rhythm?
Well, good question.
No, you are percussion talking in specific code.
Isn't that a fancy way of saying the same thing?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
So with a drum, you're needed more equipment and required more things to enjoy the accompaniment of the frequencies that are produced. With percussion, I am specifically discussing the idea that you have the modality of nothing but yourself, percussive things,
Hmm.
hands, mind, soul, body, spirit. You don't need anything else.
Heartbeat,
Yeah. So when you talk
pulse.
about drums versus percussion, it's kind of like this, um, which this is like a whole nother topic, but I ask people, would you rather be a dictionary or a thesaurus? And they're like, well, aren't they both the same thing? And I'm like, no, not really. I mean, they
Hmm.
both are used sometimes for the same thing. But if you essentially look at the basis of a thesaurus, what it is used for is to give you options. And so it is living in the space of solving or problem solving or determining flexibility of many different routes that you could take. A dictionary will only give you multiple definitions and allow you stalled time and remain stagnant.
Hmm.
Okay, now for the rest of us, summarize that with percussion and drums
Okay.
one more time.
Okay. With with a drum, it essentially looks like a poster board of somebody playing a drum set with drumsticks. It does not leave way for problem solving because you are limited to the sticks. When you have hands, you are more so in action of looking at muted modulation, non-muted modulation, whether you look at playing a slap tone, a bass tone, a slap cup tone, all of the facets of they're more closely connected to you and you have more options. Now, what's really cool about percussion versus drums is try being a drummer of a drum set and then pausing for a minute or years or so and playing percussion, a hand drum, and then going back to playing a drum set. You're more fluid as a drummer.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes and there's another question about trap. Very interested in learning more regarding trap training so that I can offer it alongside my integrative counselor practice. Will this be possible to access in the UK? So I would say, Julie, contact Casey for more specific information.
Sure.
And then Benet says, can we take a problem to a drum and receive an answer?
Yeah, that would be like an oracle, right?
Yeah. Why
Drum
not?
as an oracle.
Yeah.
Why not? Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. It's great. Thank you. Will do.
Anybody have any last questions before we call it a wrap? Okay, Julie says, or no, Deborah says, Julie, there is a training called Rhythm to Recovery that may interest you as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. This would be a whole other podcast, but do you know David R. Hawkins and his whole theory of calibrating frequencies for
No.
everyone and everything? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, like measuring frequencies and anyway, he breaks it all down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And Julie says this has been very inspiring. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate you and your time.
Hmm.
Thanks, Casey. So interesting. And my love of drumming has had a turbo boost. That's from Sally. And Kimberly says, thank you for your work. So sorry we didn't get to drum with you. So
But they
I
can,
know,
right?
I
They,
know,
they
I
they
know.
can if they get in touch with you.
Yeah, if we get in touch with me, we can figure that out. That would be fun to try to figure it out and get that going. Yeah.
Yeah.
thanks, Christine. It's really, really is interesting and amazing. Thank you so much for Casey, Deanna, and Cedric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this
Great,
is the book, Holistic Mental Health.
great,
Volume
great
Yes.
2.
guest. And you
Yes.
have a really solid presence. Like I can see your presence in itself, especially in person, would be a healing
Oh,
factor.
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah. 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 I think the confidence, I don't really know. I think the confidence is something that confidence in my spiritual and in my purpose has just bleeds through sometimes, which is really cool. But yeah, there's definitely been a lot of work done on that
Hmm.
in the spiritual space and the physical space for sure.
It's obvious.
Yeah, very,
Thank
yeah,
you.
very.
Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Cedric.
uh, Great,
Kimberly
great.
says, agree with the power of your presence.
Yeah, that's a good way of.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yes. No matter how uncomfortable it may be to you or to others.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah.
Yes.
So I usually do a closing blessing to
Mhm.
the bookend at the other end. So the one that comes to me is like customized for you,
Okay.
which is
Okay. I'm excited.
okay, ready? May you be under God's grace, safe in her care, and trusting his guidance.
Hmm. Wow. I'll take some time and meditate on that. That's deep. I like that. Wow. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're here, what is it, the second Wednesday
Wednesday
of every
of every
month?
month. Yeah.
So, so glad to have all of you here. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Casey. And that's a wrap. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.